Oh my
Podcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-host Hannah and Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Mav.
I don't know. It's the same. I literally can't tell the weeks apart, except we closely inch toward the election with each passing week, and that is the only difference. I'm still watching the Bake Off.
Okay. Oh, well, the election, let's just, that's something of hope. You can just walk towards that with hope. And you know.
Someday, due to the time travel aspect of the show, you, the audience, will be listening to an episode that we've recorded before the election, but you'll be listening to it after the election.
No. This is the week. This is actually the week before the election. This is our last. Okay. No. No, this is 2 weeks before, because November 2nd is Monday, because we release episodes. We can just delete all this because it's okay. We have 2 more weeks. We have 2 more weeks before we know. Well, probably, because the election could go on forever.
Oh,
right. God. I expect it to.
So that will be horrific. And there's my segue.
That's not funny at all.
Well, does that have to be funny? I don't know. Hannah, what's the topic this week?
Horror, but also comedy, because it turns out a lot of horror movies are actually really funny, but also intentionally so, and not because they're all super bad. And what's up with that? I mean, it's late in life in 2020 at night as we record this. We can get more intellectual as time goes on. Or not.
I love that. I mean, I think that we might have just discovered a new catchphrase for the show of what's up with that? It's just it's like Wayne's old way of ending his academic papers was, so there's that.
Yeah.
That was anyway.
I'm not here to tell you the answers. That's what we have guests for.
Yes, and we have guests.
We have a bunch of them tonight.
We have 3 guests tonight, and which is good because I personally don't watch a lot of horror movies because I am a big scaredy cat, and and also I don't believe in them. It's just that they're I actually like funny horror movies, but
so this is good for you.
Yeah, so this is the good show. Next week's show where we're talking about real horror movies. I don't like being scared. If a movie doesn't scare me, it's boring. If it does scare me, I don't want that. So funny, scary. This is good. And I'm ready for this. I'll just go down the order. Danny Anderson from the Sectarian Review returning. You haven't been on in a while. Welcome back, Danny.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me back. I've been pretty busy and not really keeping up with my own show very often. So I'm happy to jump back into this one.
I believe this is the first time you've been on since I've become your coworker, or you've become. I guess I became, because you were already working there. So
yeah. I predated you, but that's okay. We're glad to have you on. We love you.
Yeah. So Danny teaches at the school that I teach at, Mount Aloysius College in, I guess, Altoona. I don't know where I'm. Crescent. I literally just sort of drive and try not to fall asleep because I have to be there early, and then I get there and I'm like, "Hi, I'm going to teach today." That's my methodology. So Danny, welcome back, and I'm glad to have you because Danny, you are a massive horror fan.
It's a thing I like, and I'm happy to talk about it. When you told me about this the other day, I was flattered and happy to share. Right. My favorite movie happens to be a horror comedy, so we'll probably talk about that kind of thing.
Okay, and also we have this is a theme because he's been on frequent guest of Halloween shows. We have former colleague of mine, John Hadlock, who worked with me at Duquesne University, the other school that I'm affiliated with. Welcome back, John.
Hey, Mav. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
John. Yeah,
Great to be back.
And John is the opposite of me, whereas I'm a big scaredy cat. You only watch scary movies.
Pretty much, yeah. I love horror movies. Like comedies a lot. Love horror comedies. Very excited to be here.
Mm-hmm. And you're not teaching right now, so you have like a real regular person job.
Yeah, more or less. That's what I tell myself. Yeah. I'm a legal writer with an immigration law firm right now.
Oh,
wow.
So is that horror? Is that
It's horror sometimes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm working part time with a lawyer right now, and yes, there's some horror story that comes out of it.
No doubt about it.
And
I won't comment.
Oh, that's right. You live with a lawyer.
He would say attorney.
Okay. Anyway, and also returning. It's only been a couple weeks for the last guest, and it's going to be a long show, folks, because Mike Chemers is back. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mav. Actually, I'm not back. I've been here since we did the Dungeons and Diversity show, and I've just been sitting here waiting for you to turn the lights back on.
He's been talking, just none of us have noticed.
I have been talking this whole time.
I just kept this mic muted. Yeah. Welcome back.
I'm never going to leave.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of our resident monster expert. I mean, the first time you were on the show was for one of our monster shows, and you've come back for several of them and some other topics, but that's basically your wheelhouse here. So I think
it is
horror probably up that alley.
Oh, definitely. And comedy, because this definitely crosses over those polarities. But yes, it's actually in my rider that you can't do a monster show without me. Why are you laughing?
And also no green M&Ms. Yeah.
And I want no green M&Ms.
You monster.
So
I'll take the green M&Ms. It's fine.
Hannah, this was your topic. So, how is this going to work? What are we doing?
Way to put all that on me. Okay. Well, it just, it seems that honestly, like, no matter what century you start in or what genre of horror, and by genre, I mean novel, short story, TV, film, there always seems to be this weird cross between horror and comedy. And I'm not just saying things like Contagion, where it's laughably bad. Well, like little did I know when I laughed at that movie in high school. But there are things like Halloween, which, like, the end of Halloween, I just saw it recently, is genuinely frightening. But there are these like comedic moments
the original
that build
Halloween.
up. Yes, the original Halloween. To give recent examples, there's Get Out and Us, and those movies definitely use laughter to break tension, sometimes to build up tension. So what specifically unites these genres? Does something pull them apart? What is going on with having them so close together?
I like when you're just like, what's up with that?
What's up with that? I mean, I'm saying I'm giving a more general, specific introduction, but honestly, like, what is up with that? Because like Noel Carroll, who I quote in the blog post, his whole thing is like, well, they are definitely related, like from like Castle of Otranto to like parodies of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which we're going to talk about apparently, to like Psycho. Like even and he quotes like a lot of like different directors and authors talking about the relationship, but he makes the comment, you feel very differently when you laugh than when you're truly afraid. And I have a lot of thoughts about his feelings that we won't get into this episode because our listeners do not care. But
I care. I care, Hannah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think psychologically there is just the whole relief of tension. In the middle of a scary story, a laugh. There's a catharsis to that. So I think just that's a real basic explanation for why this happens. I'm also curious just to talk about some of the cases where the existence of one compromises the other, which we'll get into. I have some specific examples of that in mind that we'll get to. But when the comedy overwhelms, like I'm watching a scary movie and it becomes kind of so ridiculous, I can't take the horror seriously. And comedy movies that go too far into the horror thing and just the balance doesn't work. So I think it's important. I think I see it happening all the time, obviously, but I think that's a tough balance to get right. So what's up with that?
So Wayne, what you're talking about, Wayne, is something that in theater parlance we call juxtaposition, which is the association of things that are categorical opposites, and that does create incongruity. So you have, like, for instance, you see a fat clown paired with a skinny clown, or a very clean Pulcinella set against a vagrant circus clown, or something like that. And this is very important, especially in 20th century social protest theater. It can be funny, but it can also be shocking, right? And it can also be horrific when the stimulus is grotesque enough to generate a horror response, right? As opposed to a comic one or just an intellectual one, right? But this is not always funny, right? Things that are juxtaposed can also be intellectually juxtaposed, where you go, oh, isn't that interesting? And that, like, there's a lot of that kind of juxtaposition in the movie Fight Club, where you see beautiful things and horrible things paired together. But then a juxtaposition can also be horrific if the things are so incongruous and so grotesque. The stimulus is so grotesque that it generates the horrific response, right? But it generates both a horrific response and a comic response.
Just Noel Carroll does say that horror is intimately, and I'm quoting him, and essentially bound up with the violation, problematization, and transgression of our categories, norms, concept, and that is also true of humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the prime images that comes out of a lot of horror that is the scary clown thing. You know, here's this thing that is ostensibly supposed to be funny, and it's scary as fuck.
Yes.
So I think that just as an image, that's one of the key symbolic images of what we're talking about.
I actually have a theory about this. About
I'm
why.
not surprised. Go ahead.
Not from The Simpsons?
No, no, an honest to God theory that I thought up all by myself.
Wow. Okay.
So it's basically this, that I think that in many cases, and this is a very complex phenomenon, so I don't just want to reduce it to some sort of, general theory that's always true. But it does seem to me that it's possible to recognize that much of what is horrific and much of what is funny would be indistinguishable from one another absent a certain semiotic conditioning, right? Which in the theater we call aesthetic distance. If this, you could be looking at something, and if you are close to it, if you are aesthetically very close to it, it seems horrific. But if you're far away from it, it seems silly. It's funny.
If you slip and fall, it's funny. If I slip and fall, it's tragic.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm thinking of Alan Alda and that one Woody Allen movie where he talks about comedy is tragedy plus time.
Right.
Well, yeah. I was gonna say, because Danny, I think it's the last time I was on your show. I lose track of, it's in the before times. At some point, I was on your show when we were at TheoCon last year, where we talked about this connection specifically with Jordan Peele's work, where he does do the exact same tropes in his comedy in the Key and Peele show as he does in his horror films.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is the behind the scenes of Family Matters, where Urkel is like a mind control monster, and he gets himself written into the show. And it's a horror skit that's hilarious, right? And so there's definitely I think you're right. The semiotic sort of signaling is the only real difference there,
right? And so the exact same thing, the exact same stimulus can be one or the other.
Yeah. Makes me think of maybe because I just watched it, but I don't know if anyone is. I'm sure other people besides me are familiar with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's a fascinating movie because there are lots of scenes where I think from a certain lens they'd be sort of funny. The way Leatherface kind of skitters around the kitchen area and like makes these high pitched weird noises. In another context, I think would be humorous, but it's terrifying for some reason. Right. I'm not sure which semiotic clues make that happen, to use your phrasing, Michael. It's a strange phenomenon.
I think it's, when Wayne is talking about how the balance is off, that's when the entirety of the performance, the entirety of the cultural product isn't serving this this very delicate operation. It's a very complex, obviously very complex and delicate operation.
One of the examples I have for that, and I will probably take shit for this. For the most part, I like this movie. Like Us, it's another one filmed where Michael lives in Santa Cruz. Lost Boys. I think Lost Boys is stylistically gorgeous. I think the vampire bits are really incredibly well done.
It's entirely a comedy.
Yeah, but the comedic bits took me completely out of the horror aspects of that film. And maybe it was my expectations when I first saw it. I was expecting a horror film, and I got the Corys, goofing off for 2 hours.
Oh God! Yeah. Don't even get me started.
And so, so that's a case of I haven't rewatched it in years, and I need to, since I've now been out to Santa Cruz and would recognize some of that.
Lost Boys is entirely an 80s teen-exploitation film in the vein of John Hughes, except that there happen to be vampires.
Yeah.
And it's about gay. It's about being gay, right?
Right, but it's still the same. But I mean, it's formulaically, it's just exactly like all of them, which I love it, by the way. I'm a fan.
I love that movie. That's one of my favorites. I love that movie.
Now, I need to watch it. At the time, I felt just, let's say that the comedic bits took me out of the horror aspect of it. I guess partially I just wanted something different out of it, and that's more me than the fault of the movie.
Because I live in Santa Cruz, I am forbidden to not love.
Well, you shop with the guy who was in the movie, the comic store.
Yeah, the comic book store where I shop for my comic books is that was featured in this film. So I have to say, hey, Joe and everybody at Atlantis, we love you.
And great little store. Shameless plug.
Yeah, shameless plug for Atlantis Comics. Yeah. If you're in Santa Cruz, come to Atlantis Comics. Now they have to like to sponsor us,
please. By all means.
Yeah, definitely. So, but what was I going to say about that? There's a great example of one of the few scary moments in that movie is when the main character, who's played by I can't remember, is hanging out with the vampires, and he's eating. He thinks he's eating chow mein, and it turns out to be maggots. Right? You remember this? No?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Jason Patrick. Yeah.
Jason Patrick. Thank you so much.
I was waiting for a break. I was going to say that. Yeah. Jason Patrick was the star there.
So that exact same scene appears in What We Do in the Shadows when they're torturing this guy, and he says like, "You're eating maggots," and he's not. They haven't pulled it off. He's still eating spaghetti. And so that's an example, right, of how the conditioning, the exact same stimulus. It's funny in one context and not in another.
I also think that it's interesting because I think the time has a lot to do with it. And I guess this is an aesthetic question about what scares an audience at a particular time.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine. I love the Universal horror films. I just rewatched The Mummy recently. I love them, but they don't read as scary to us now. They read more as funny. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're actually more comedic, and Bride of Frankenstein's overtly a comedy. Mm-hmm. And so I think that and like I show my students Nosferatu, which is sort of a foundational horror film. And I tell them, this is going to seem funny to you. Mm-hmm. Don't worry about it. It's the same. It's horror signals that just don't translate as scary to us today because of our cultural context.
Right. And, Noel Carroll, you mentioned Noel Carroll, Hannah, and I think in that exact same essay, he says, this is actually a quote. He says, standardly, horror does not blend into humor nor vice versa. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. What a silly thing to say, because Bride of Frankenstein, exactly. Humor and horror are the aesthetic equivalents of chocolate and peanut butter, two great tastes that taste great together.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if what we're talking about are not exactly horror comedies, but when horror goes awry and becomes a comedy, your Troll 2s, your I don't know, Troll 2's the only thing I can think of besides.
Well, I actually have a question because, again, not a horror aficionado, but there are movies that I like, and I think I'll start with the Universal monster movies because most of those were at one point meant to be scary. Like it was a different time, and I was actually scary, I was talking a couple of years ago when the movie It came out. A friend of mine was just asking around on Facebook. I guess her 13, 14-year-old daughter wanted to go see it, and see it with like friends, and it's like, and she's like, it's rated R. I don't know about this. What do people think? And some of the recommendations, people were like, well, too scary for them. So if they want to watch a scary movie, why don't you sit them down and show them like the old Universal, show them the original Frankenstein, the original Mummy and everything. And then the kids were like, we don't want to see those because and I had to explain. I was like, no, the kids are not interested in your goofy horror movies that were for their great grandparents. The kids are interested in seeing the cool movie that's out right now so they can tell their friends, mm-hmm. I went and saw it. But that said, no one had any qualms about showing The Mummy or Frankenstein or Dracula or any of these 60-year-old, 80-year-old horror films.
Well, to be fair, I mean, the thing about that is like the content definitely is different because like, I mean, it explicitly has a storyline about like sexual abuse with like, featuring a child, which like, that is far scarier. And like the thing about it is like the demons that like, and this is why I appreciate it more than some horror films because I'm ambivalent about the genre, but that we don't care about my feelings. It is more. We
care. Michael pointed out that he cares. I care. Yeah. We all care, Hannah.
Hannah, I totally care about your safe space.
I don't care, Hannah. I'm just kidding.
It's fine if you don't care.
I'm just kidding.
But like the thing about it is like the scary things in the children's lives are not just like, oh, there's a clown. It's like there are like real life demons, the things that like really scare us.
The bully, the creepy molesting uncle. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Or father. Father had the key.
Father. Yeah. And you can't get away from this. And like, I mean, this is like what Dracula was in the 19th century when, people were like terrified of like, immigrants coming to the country and like sexuality that wasn't heteronormative and those kinds of things. But like it's in our, it's translated to like something that we might understand better, though, actually Dracula translates pretty well, turns out. To our current moment.
I think, Hannah, that's why I felt that, although I thought that the It movies, the most recent ones, I thought they were pretty good movies. I didn't find them particularly scary.
I totally agree.
Whereas the old television series with Tim Curry as Pennywise,
terrifying,
really, really goddamn scary. Wait, we can do swearing on the show, right? We have swearing.
Yeah.
Okay, really fucking scary. Really fucking scary. And I think it was because exactly what you said, Hannah, that it deals far more frankly and openly with these the childhood sexual abuse and the bullying and all those other things that than the more recent ones.
The new movies just slipped into just what I think of as cliche monster movie things, like, oh, here's something weird and creepy and scary that's shaking and jittering and chasing you, whatever, but it didn't deal with the psychological stuff.
So, weirdly, for like talking about horror and comedy, the end of It Part 2 is actually just like extremely interesting in that because the like solution to fear is to laugh at it and like laugh it away.
Right.
And turned it into baby creepy thing that people might find grotesquely cute or something. Right. Not me. Other people have expressed opinion.
Just like that scene in Harry Potter where you fight the Bogart, right?
Yeah,
you turn
Freddy
it.
Krueger too. No, I guess you're not supposed to laugh at Freddy Krueger, but if you turn your back on him, that's what takes his power away.
Right. Noel Carroll, he talks about two portrayals of Frankenstein's monster, one in The House of Frankenstein in 1944 and the other in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein 1948. And the actor, he points out, he doesn't mention it's Glenn Strange, but the actor is doing the exact same shtick in both movies.
Yes.
Right. And in one of them, it's horrific, and another one, it's funny. And it's all because of the context of whether Abbott and Costello are in the movie, right?
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I wanted to bring up. We had the things that have become funny because context changed just with time, like your original Frankenstein, all these movies that the Mummy just seem comical because technology is in a different place. There's just a different cultural context, all these things. But then that's an intentional context shift because quite honestly, storyline wise, to the extent that continuity matters in any of those, which is, very rough. But Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein and the other, I think they also met the Wolfman and I don't remember which ones, but those movies slide right into the canon. They're just weird. Yeah, they're just weird because Abbott and Costello are there, and that adds humor because they're trying. But it's exactly what you're talking about. It's a different signifier that sort of tells you there's Lou Abbott. It's okay to laugh now, or Lou Costello.
I'm going to say it's funny you should mention that because in the pre-show, Hannah was bringing up these early farces of Frankenstein, burlesques of Frankenstein that appeared in the 19th century. And just so happens that I wrote a book called The Monster in Theater History, This Thing of Darkness, Routledge 2018. And please put that in the chat.
Link to the show note.
Link in the show notes. And on page 62 of this book, I just happen to have it here. I point out that I'll say, okay, so the first Frankenstein play was produced in 1823. That was just called Presumption. Okay. Or The Fate of Frankenstein. And the same guy, Richard Peake, the same guy wrote a burlesque of this called Another Piece of Presumption, which also appeared in 1823. There was another one called Frankenstitch or The Needle Prometheus.
This is the best thing that's ever happened. Sorry.
It's, right, Hannah? Right? Frankenstitch. And this is about a guy who forms a golem he's a tailor, and he forms a golem out of tailor scraps. And then there was another one called Frankensteam. So those came out within 9 months of the original production. So that also the same thing. It was like, it could be scary. And this is the first time that anyone had ever seen Frankenstein on stage. And yet within a few months, they're burlesquing it.
Yeah, and you don't even need Abbott Costello, right? It's like, I think you think about the universal cycle. Like we said, Bride of Frankenstein explicitly went into comedy.
Very funny.
The Old Dark House, 1932, is a horror film that is very open with its comedy as well. As Dracula and Frankenstein, right on the heels of those two. And so, yeah, I think that there's a way in which they just kind of naturally blend together. And I think, for me, the obvious, well, maybe it's not obvious, but the thing that I go to at least is that both horror and comedy are a way to kind of illuminate things that are subliminal or inappropriate for society. You can't go around, and polite society can't function if you're going around noticing overtly how ridiculous everything is, right? We have to pretend it's not. But comedy allows us to laugh at what we already know is ridiculous.
I don't know if that was, that might not have used to been true, but it's 2020 now. There's a Trump presidency. There's, we laugh at the world now. The only way to get by.
Yes. And polite society has not worked, right? Because of that. And so I think, I think that's a thing that they have in common, though, is that they both tap into that unspoken, critique of society. And therefore, in many ways, they're indistinguishable.
Mm-hmm. So is there a way to move from that we're going to loop back to it because I want to get the third area, which was, John, what you were talking about. What do you do? How does this happen for the unintentionally funny? Troll 2 is not supposed to be a comedy, right? They're actually, I'm trying to think, there's definitely
That's
other
the
horror
saddest
movies.
thing I've ever heard.
The Happening is not supposed to be a comedy. It's just there are horror movies where comedy happened. It did occur.
Yeah. Troll 2 is so interesting because we were talking before about what sort of the psychological underpinnings and how that can make horror really scary when you're looking at something and trying to be, when you're looking in the face something that is psychologically frightening, real life troubles. Troll 2 wants you to be afraid of vegetarians. And I think that's why it's not.
I am
frightening.
No, I'm not.
Look,
I'm sorry.
Vegetarians.
I'm sorry.
The demon is vegetarian.
What?
Yeah, the evil society of the town, all the trolls. Their whole thing is that they feed you vegetables, and it makes you a vegetable so you can be eaten by them. And that's hilarious.
Well, that's not true vegetarianism, is it?
Well, that's fair.
As far as we know.
Okay, some of us are trying to be more vegetarian in our lifestyles, and that just involves more broccolini, not Soylent Green.
A lot of things that make
I had broccoli tonight. It was very good. I also had it with chicken, but it was good. I
didn't say I was a vegetarian. I said I was trying.
Yeah. But anyway, so if you take something like that, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm not sure. With Troll 2, I feel like they were really trying. There are lots of horror movies, things made by Troma, for instance, or things that, all the B movies. Where they only had $20, right?
Fantasy Island, or
Fantasy Island. Was Fantasy Island trying? Because the Troma people, they're like, look, we've got $50 to make this picture, so we can only afford so much. So we're gonna put some comedy in here just to stitch the whole thing together. Fantasy Island, it's Blumhouse, but they've got a budget. Troll 2.
What I'm saying is they tried to make a horror movie, and the results of that were disappointing by any metric possible. And I think that's like true of like something like The Happening, or as I said, Contagion. And then like,
okay,
you just find, you know, people like the only way to deal with like being faced with such horror in the sense of, oh my God, if I have to sit through this movie for 2 hours, my brain is going to melt. So you have to find it funny to cope with what you're doing.
Well, I guess my question is, how's this different than anything that's supposedly serious that is terrible, like The Room or something, right? That they didn't intend it to be funny, but it's just an overreach of seriousness, right? That not that I've actually never seen The Room, so I don't know that this is.
I love The Room.
I don't know if this is categorically different than any kind of artistic failure.
Well, yeah, I think that's a solid point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I think you said artistic failure.
Yeah, and maybe it's just more noticeable in the horror genre because we're supposed to be scared and instead we're laughing.
Yes,
so it's more noticeable.
Well, and you look at
it's a stronger juxtaposition, to use that big fancy word.
Juxtaposition. I mean, you look at the films of Ed Wood, right? That's a perfect example. Because Ed Wood, seriously, they had $25 and he was like, we're going to make the scariest possible movie. And he really thought,
well, we have $25 and I want to take home as much change as I can. So if I can do it for $17.50, you know?
Right. I'm going to do it for $17.50. And so, but he was sitting there in the premiere and he really thought, or at least this is how he was portrayed by Johnny Depp in that wonderful film that they made, that he really thought that people were going to give him an Oscar for this, you know, that Plan 9 from Outer Space was the scariest alien horror movie ever made. Right. And if you watch it like that, you're going to be incredibly disappointed.
I pulled up a list of this is from IFC. These are the 10 horror movies that are more hilarious than scary unintentionally. The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant, which I've never seen.
Never seen.
The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant. The Stuff, I've not seen. The Beyond, I've not seen. Urban Legend, I have seen Urban Legend. Urban Legend was like, you remember Scream? We can do that too. They could not.
I will defend Urban Legend.
And it still became a franchise.
It's not Scream. They were trying at first, and they were trying real hard. They were just like, we're just going to do that same thing.
But you know, we can't do a horror comedy show without talking about Scream. I feel.
We'll get to it. Yeah. So, but then just to go through the rest of their list, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. They are right. That movie is hilarious.
It's a different kind of horror. Yeah.
But you know, I like Data in that. So.
Yeah, I was going to say,
which I've not seen. Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. I forgot that existed. Wow. House of the Dead. Yeah. Oh, really? Here's one that I have seen, and I've seen it both in MST3K style and without. Manos: The Hands of Fate.
Manos: The Hands of Fate is a perfect movie.
Yeah, and then number 1 is Troll 2. So,
oh my God, Manos: The Hands of Fate. That's another one where they really were hoping that it would be scary, and yeah, it's just not.
The Master.
That's right, but that's just a failure across the board, right?
Yeah.
You know, Ed Wood, you can redeem it. It's a failure, but it's such a great failure that it's still terrific. Like Plan 9 from Outer Space, or his follow-up film Orgy of the Damned, which is the worst movie. The worst. When people say, "What's the worst vampire movie you've ever seen?" and is it Twilight? And I'm like, amazingly, it is not Twilight. It is Orgy of the Damned by Ed Wood.
Okay, but to be fair, Twilight is actually pretty entertaining to watch. It's pretty funny.
You and me are really different people, Hannah.
I grew up as a teenager who was forced to read Twilight. Like, I mean, you've heard the story. It's fine. You can go back to our old monster episodes and hear the story about how I got roped into reading Twilight. But the movie is so funny. It's like so low budget, but like Catherine Hardwicke, the director, is trying so hard, and you can tell Robert Pattinson hates every moment of being there. And actually, the funniest thing about Twilight is watching Robert Pattinson interviews talk about being in that series. Mm-hmm. He really hated it. It's really funny.
And he's never going to get it off his neck either.
Oh, he's made nothing. It's funny because now he's Batman and people are like, the guy from Twilight. It's like, no, the guy who just made 47 indie films that all went to Cannes and Sundance. Like,
right. And he will never shake
his ass off. No,
he will never shake it.
If he's a good enough Batman, I guess maybe, but then it's still not what he wants. He wants to be a serious actor, and it's never. Yeah,
and he shouldn't have done Twilight.
I mean, so like Kristen Stewart is never going to shake being from Twilight, but also she's doing like super well, and like she was great in Charlie's Angels, which I didn't think I would ever say.
She is. I actually like that movie. I like the most recent Charlie's Angels.
I do too. It's really good. It's not horrific in any way.
No,
it's very funny though.
It's delightfully fine. Yeah, you know,
I just feel like we have to take a minute and unpack that sentence, Hannah. You said Kristen Stewart was really good in Charlie's Angels.
Yes,
she is. I
just want to break that
very
down.
Much so.
I just don't think that that's a sentence that can be said in the English language.
You should see it. She is excellent in it.
She knows one of the best parts. Yeah,
she knows exactly what movie she's in. She knows how to play it. She knows how to play it straight. She knows how to play it like she's in the 80s film and then the early 2000s films, and she knows how to play it like it's like she's in a complete farce, and she seamlessly drifts between them as the scene requires, and it's believable, and she seems like a real character. She's probably the best part of the film.
Yeah, she's really. But now that I'm taking you down this rabbit hole, I'm just gonna non sequitur to, but like Scream is actually really good.
Yes, and scary.
And scary and funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Scary and funny, yeah. And I think that's the key.
And that's kind of so that's one of the, I wanted to ask that question because Scream was designed. The first Scream was very much designed to be a parody. The original title of it was going to be Scary Movie, and it was talked up like it was going to be what the Scary Movie franchise became. And then it like turns out that the first Scream, especially the first one, the others diminishing returns, but fine. The first Scream is a legitimately very good movie. That is scary and funny and becomes in a lot of ways to me, even though it's trying to sort of meta comment on the horror industry, I think that it still becomes a serviceable and in fact a really good horror film, even while doing its funny commentary in a way that, like, and this is my contention with Urban Legend. I don't think Urban Legend knew what it was doing when it tried to do the same trick. It went through the motions and it didn't have the nuance that Scream had, at least to me. But I thought, I mean, I don't think Urban Legend's horrible. I'm not a big horror fan. So I watched it and I was like, this is not scary and it's not particularly funny. So I guess this is fine, but I'm bored. Whereas Scream, I've watched since it came out and I'm like, this is really legitimately good. I also say the same about something that same production studio, I believe, but I Know What You Did Last Summer it follows in that same vein. And I liked that one too, though I think Scream is better.
Well, Scream also is a whodunit that's actually pretty smart, which I, appreciate because there's like that added mystery element in the sense that like it's not just a mysterious monster figure. It's like what normal human being is behind the Scream mask. And, it's the horror of our everyday lives kind of Scooby-Doo thing.
Yeah. I think that's so true, Hannah. I think that to me, that's what Scream did. That's that doesn't really contribute to the sort of meta commentary element of it. It really made slashers whodunits again, which I think really is such an improvement from what you're talking about, Hannah. And it's really, I mean, I grew up with Scream and I was like 7 the first time I saw it because I was, I think, about 7 when it came out.
God,
and
I am very old.
few of the references made any sense to me. I hadn't seen Halloween yet. I don't think I hadn't seen most of the movies that it alludes to. I just thought it was a scary, good movie.
I think I was 7 when I saw Frankenstitch.
So you're like 200 years old.
I've said it before on this show, Wayne is really old.
It's true.
Actually, I didn't see.
So here's another, no segue whatsoever, but I feel remiss if I didn't bring up Army of Darkness.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know that I have anything to say. Yeah, and I don't know that I have anything remarkable to say about it other than it's genuinely funny. I don't know if it's scary. I think there are places it tries to be, but the humor is so over the top that.
So for our 3 guests, all of whom, you guys all play in the horror market, certainly more than I do, and I think more than Wayne or Hannah as well. Is Army of Darkness? Well, okay, the first Evil Dead, I will say, certainly is a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure on any of the other ones.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good one, but Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, I don't know that any of them, are they horror movies?
No, I think you're right.
I don't know.
Evil Dead is a horror movie that has some funny moments in it.
Right.
And then when they got together and they said, okay, let's see if we can wring some more money out of this cash cow, they decided that they were just going to go for the funny parts, right?
On Evil Dead 2.
It becomes a
Evil Dead 2
slapstick
and Army of Darkness.
kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know that a movie has to be scary to be a horror movie, because then
I agree.
That's my real question.
does Nosferatu stop becoming a horror movie then after you're not scared by it, right? It's still a horror movie. And I think that it's just a matter of, I think it's more about, I guess it's more about content and I don't want to say subject matter, but images and that sort of thing than anything else. I don't know. I just don't know that I want to overly define the horror movie as something that I have to be scared by.
Well, and that's also like an individual. That's also an individual.
We'll be talking about some of that in the next episode.
Next week. Yeah. But I'm curious. I mean, just for the context of this. Okay. So, I mean, does Army of Darkness count? Because I don't know. It's not scary. I don't think it's intended to be like there's monsters and stuff that he's fighting, but you're not supposed to be scared of them. But I guess what I'm saying is, given the base plot of Army of Darkness, I'm not sure what makes it a horror movie and not the first Avengers movie.
What?
Because it's basically the same thing. It's now it's a guy versus a team, but they're just fighting, CGI monsters.
Did you say the first Avengers movie?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
well, I mean, because they're fighting, they're just fighting monsters, invading monsters, trying to close the portal. That's the plot, right? I mean, obviously it's not, but like, I just think of them both as action movies.
But with monsters.
Yeah. The Avengers is not a horror film, even though it has monsters in it.
Right.
Well, then
it has to do,
Army of Darkness. Yeah.
Right. So it has to do with context, right? That's what we're talking about is context.
Yes.
The way that they sell it. I mean, there was a movie that I actually thought was pretty scary, a vampire movie I thought was pretty scary, called Innocent Blood.
Oh, yeah.
And
filmed there in Pittsburgh.
That's right. And it came out and it was marketed as a horror film. And then when it went to video, it was marketed as a comedy. Mm-hmm. And so they took all the, when they were doing the trailer for the video, they put in all the funny lines in the movie. Right. But I actually thought when I first saw it that it was pretty scary. And then when I saw that they were marketing it as a comedy in order to get the video, I was surprised at that.
Well, not the same movie, but I originally thought Parasite, Oscar-winning film.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go work that. I originally thought that was a horror movie because it was marketed to me by reviewers as a horror movie. And then when I went into theaters, I just, I thought of it, like this is actually like a social commentary comedy. And then it takes a bit of a turn, which I refuse to explain on this show because you should watch it. And I don't want to spoil it because honestly, the magic of Parasite is having no idea what you're going into.
Yes, absolutely. Which is what makes Parasite hard to define, right? Because everybody's like, oh, it's got twists and turns, which kind of signals horror or at least suspense. And Parasite's its own thing, which you should watch because it's remarkable and amazing and wonderful.
But, Noel Carroll, I'm not saying he's totally correct, says that part of what makes horror is like the monster, and maybe the monster in Parasite is capitalism in the same way that Hannibal Lecter is like a monster in Silence of the Lambs, or we have Frankenstein's monster, or Frankenstein, depending on how you decide to read Frankenstein. Which he has a very specific definition of what a monster is that we don't need to get into. But it has to deal with it not being based in reality.
We've had 3 other shows on that. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
Do more.
Don't get me started.
We'll be up all night.
Well, I think Hannah, you're right. Danny, said something earlier about over determining the definition, the grounding between a horror film and a comedy film and an adventure film, right? I mean, those are just marketing terms. We don't have to obey that kind of genre inflexibility, right?
Sure. Genre is only useful in as much as it allows you to talk usefully about it. You can ignore it when it suits you.
Right. So we can talk about comedic films that have horrific elements or horror films that have comedic elements, and that shouldn't be a problem for us, right? We're smart enough to handle that.
Yeah.
Audience, as I said on our last episode, there was a study at Harvard that demonstrated that the audience of Vox Popcasts are the smartest people in the world.
Don't look it up. It's not linked in the show notes. Just trust us. It's there.
Don't link it in the show notes, but it's there. It's true. It's a total thing.
All three of them.
What does smart even mean?
Hey, Dave.
Doing better than that.
Oh, man.
Okay, so there is one other category that I sort of, I mean, it wasn't in one of John's, but I'm just thinking there is a different kind of horror comedy that is I guess the intentionally funny dark comedy. So on one aspect, I think Jordan Peele does this with his films. Like he's using comedy to inform the horror and to work on another level in a way that I think is very obvious. He's very good at it, but it's very obvious. The ones that I'm wondering about things are, Hannah, you mentioned in the blog Ready or Not, which I watched just today, in fact. But also
amazing film, best film that no one watched. Also very Marxist, anti-capitalist. Yeah.
All right.
And then the other one that reminded me of it, which I think is a better film, but same vein. There's a movie called Very Bad Things, which is I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's a dark comedy. Is it a horror movie? I think it's a horror movie. It's horrific. I think of it as a horror movie.
Would you say Midsommar fits in this category?
Yeah, I have not seen it.
I have not seen
neither of these films, but I'll watch them both, I guess.
The premise of Very Bad Things is that the weekend before the main two characters get married, so the guys go off to a bachelor party in Vegas. They accidentally kill a hooker, and then their lives just spiral out of control from there. That's the premise of it. They kill somebody on accident, but they don't want to admit it because then that will ruin the wedding and no one will believe that it was an accident and blah, 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 blah. So from there, it's just a continual, like the stakes become raised, and every time they cover it up, more people die, it's more of a serial killer story. It's got horrific elements, but it's very, very funny. Cameron Diaz is in it. Christian Slater's in it. It's really good. And I recommend it, but I don't want to give away any of the twists to it because of the nature of what we're talking about. It's not as good as Parasite, but still.
I mean, would you count Midsommar in this category?
I've never seen it. I think so from what I've heard about it, but I've never seen it.
It's so weird. Has anyone else seen it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. It's like very slow. And honestly, when I was watching it, I was kind of bored at parts. And then I left the theater and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I could talk about this for a while. I guess this is our chance. But it I think that you could definitely read it as a dark comedy, which is what the director has claimed it is, but also at times like the tone can be very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Are we thinking of the same movie? Are you talking about Midsommar, like the recent?
Yes.
I don't know actors and actors' names.
Yes.
They go to Sweden.
Yeah.
One that's Wicker Man, but new.
Yeah. Yes. I think
people thought it was funny. It's horrifying.
Some of it's that's what I'm saying. Like some of it's extremely okay. I mean, the parts that I think are funny are there's these like two graduate students and they're fighting over their thesis.
Okay, you're totally right. That is hilarious because I'm like, this is not how graduate students I know are, but maybe that's not why you thought it was funny.
There's a deleted scene about like JSTOR or something, and I know some of our listeners are like, what is this girl talking about? If you are thinking that in your mind, good. Live your life how you are. Don't try and figure out what I'm talking about. But they're like, I mean, like, yeah, like, and by your surprise that I'm like, oh, this can be like read as like funny. This shows you like, it's like, well, what is this guy talking about? Why is he claiming this is a black comedy? Because it's extremely horrifying and there's no happy ending. You should definitely not read this as like a feminist win.
So is there a happy ending? I'm sorry. I didn't Aster mark that as his breakup movie, like, and so and from that sense, I think it is a happy ending. I don't know.
Again, I've not seen it, so and it seems like I'm the only one. Is this?
I haven't seen it.
Okay,
it's a cult movie.
Is this the opposite of what Mike was talking about with context? Right. The fact that the fact that Hannah reads it as comedic and John doesn't, like, is that context of the audience in the same way as like you know what I'm saying?
And marketing, I think for that movie, there's like two things. One is there's a tradition of folk horror, right? Someone mentioned The Wicker Man, right? And so there's a tradition that we can already kind of slip it into that category. But also Astor's other movie, Hereditary, was clearly a horror film. And so we were sort of expecting another one like that. And it has a lot in common, I think. And so in terms of the folk horror sort of angle. And so I think, it's almost like we consider Alfred Hitchcock a horror filmmaker on some level, even though he very rarely actually made horror films. But it's just sort of like the reputation, I suppose, of the filmmaker there.
My favorite Hitchcock movie is Notorious, and it's not at all. It's a spy film.
Well, he claims Psycho was a big joke.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. I've been drifting out of the conversation. Don't listen to me. Cut this out.
No,
maybe the real psychos were the friends we met along the way.
It's just, I have so many. I mean, it's weird because what we're talking about is, and I thought this conversation was going to go another way. We were talking about, we're not really even talking about the elements of what makes horror and comedy. We started talking there, but horror and comedy sort of tickle the same part of the brain in a way, right? Like you're using some of the same tropes there. Peele has said this a lot about his films, that comedy is meant to do social commentary, or at least good comedy is. And he'd say good horror is also meant to do social commentary. And that's why, that's why he's doing what he is with us, with Get Out. Like he's in his version of Twilight Zone. Like that's what he's trying to do. It's what Twilight Zone always tried to do. And that's where that element of humor comes in. But I don't know that tracks for all of them, or maybe it does.
Mav, it tracks for the best of it, right? The best horror is the one where we can look at it and experience it on many levels and say, this is not only about my own personal psychology and what I'm afraid of, but also about things that are going on in the society around me. I mean, and Jordan Peele is the king of this in our current milieu, right? Whereas maybe Todd Browning was, back in the day. But I just finished watching Lovecraft Country, right, which Jordan Peele had a hand in. And I thought that was an absolutely excellent combination of social commentary and the horror. The monsters in it were perfectly calibrated to reflect these larger social issues that the author was really interested in. In our timeline, this is the Tuesday after the Sunday that the season finale of Lovecraft Country came out. Yeah. And,
I mean, even maybe not the best or like, we haven't talked about Stranger Things, which is also like a horror comedy show. And I actually realized like how reactionary season 4 is. And I love season 4. I thought the Scoops Troop was great. And also like the Duffer Brothers are from Durham. So like actually like the small town is literally Durham, North Carolina, where Duke is. So it's like, oh, hey, there's the Eno River. Anyway, but it was very like conservative and like I was like very nostalgic. But like that is also speaking to our particular cultural moment in ways that maybe we don't like in the same way as something like Ready or Not, where it's like literally let's burn down the rich. That is literally that is the film.
So you consider Ready or Not a comedy? Because that's what I'm wondering there. It's got funny moments.
It has slasher elements. It like plays with the like idea of the final girl. It is. I think it's pretty funny, but I think it like kind of actually meets a trio of films that all came out around like a similar, I think like fiscal or like year, where it was like Us in March and then Ready or Not in the summer and then
Knives Out,
and then Knives Out and like Parasite was released around the same time. And all these movies are speaking to like in different ways the horrors of like unfettered capitalism, both like in the US and like globally. And
that's kind of probably one of the problems with Ready or Not. It sort of got lost in the shuffle. I think the other films that you mentioned are better than Ready or Not was, but Ready or Not was better than a lot of stuff that came out in the summer of 2019. It really got swallowed up.
I will say that I'm not saying that Ready or Not is the best film ever made, but I think it like has actually like a similar kind of vibe to like Clue in a lot of ways, although much more bloody. And it, you know, it does like take it uses like some of the more
much more bloody. So if anybody's listening, they're like, oh, I like Clue. We watched that as a family. I showed it with my kids.
It's like rated R for a reason, you guys. Pay attention to like the labels.
Yes.
But like yes. But you know, like it does like take some of the more like ridiculous elements of like, you know, horror comedy, like things like actually we haven't mentioned him, which I'm fine with, except I'm going to, like Tim Burton. It takes like some like Tim Burton, like Sweeney Todd, like kind of imagery, and like plays with that in really interesting ways, and like the like callousness of like the family is really like interesting, and how they like mix it with like them owning a game company. It's all just very interesting. And I think like it knows its genre, and it knows it's kind of a B horror movie, and really leans into that. And also like I won't spoil it, but the emotional arcs of the characters is really interesting in a way I wasn't expecting, because of the tropes of certain aspects of the genre of like horror and the gothic via Jane Eyre, which probably means nothing to anyone unless you've read both of those things and think similarly to me.
Yeah, but, no, I mean, haven't seen it. I know where you're going. I get where you're going with it.
Yeah, but you know, it's a really interesting film, and if you like kind of like dark horror and don't mind some a lot of blood, then you know, it could be a really like nice Halloween diversion for you, because practical magic isn't streaming anywhere.
So
well, I had, before we resolve nothing, I had one more, because what about stuff like a lot of the Blumhouse stuff. So my favorite horror movie, I guess, of the last couple of years, I really, really liked Happy Death Day, and I think this fits. Is it meta commentary like a Scream? Is it just very self-aware? I mean, has anybody else seen it? I've seen both of them. I've seen Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day 2. I loved it. The first one especially, I thought was great. John, you said you have seen it.
I thought it was fun. Yeah, I didn't see the second one. I thought it was fun. Aiming for a Scream sort of thing. Yeah. Pretty funny. I don't know if I have any much more to say besides that.
For context, it's doing, I mean, and maybe it's just, you know, the subgenre quickly becoming a major genre of, it's a Groundhog Day movie. And like, you know, the Groundhog Day trope, I just guess it lends itself to, you know, to meta commentary very well, because that's just, it lets you know, since the very nature of a time loop is, let's comment on this thing because we're just going to repeat the same day over and over again.
Let's dissect this thing.
Yeah, right. So it becomes a very thinky movie just because of what it is, and it's literally trying to like sort of, all right, if you can repeat the same day over and over again, you can analyze this horror movie from 18 different angles, because we're going to just kind of go through it and look at the killer this way. And you know, it's a whodunit, like Hannah was saying, you know, with Scream, but it's a whodunit where you can sort of pick it apart because you just keep seeing, you know, different aspects of it. And then they do the same thing in Happy Death Day 2, which is oddly more science fiction-y than the first one is.
I also think that the Groundhog Day story lends itself really well to horror as well, because one of the ways to kind of define something as horror is that if it kind of violates our understandings of the natural world, right? That's something that makes something monstrous. And so, yeah, the way we conceive of linear time. So just the idea of a Groundhog Day is kind of a natural fit for a horror film.
So is actual Groundhog Day, is that a horror movie?
Not because of the context. If you change the context, maybe just slightly, then yeah. But as it is, I don't think so.
Just a slight
movie that has Andy McDowell in it is not a horror movie.
Oh, but she's in Ready or Not, and she's great.
She is?
She is, yeah.
Oh my God, okay.
Yeah, she's great.
I'm an idiot on pop culture today.
Well, you know, Four Weddings and a Funeral is pretty horrific to me.
I don't know, but she's great. She's great in Ready or Not. Andy McDowell. Yeah, and so I don't know.
See this film, obviously.
It's worth. I mean, I guess we can tell the plot, because the plot is given away literally in the trailer. it is not a movie with surprises. I mean, there's a few at the end.
No,
it's
not
a movie
surprises.
about twists and turns. It's a movie about execution of this basic premise, which is a young woman played by Samara Weaving is marrying into a rich family. And the family tradition is on your wedding night, when you marry into the family, you've got to play a game. They own a gaming empire, so you've got to play some game. You draw a random card from their collection of, here are the games that we have, and then you play the game. And that welcomes you to the family.
And if it's hide and seek,
she draws the card that says hide and seek. But hide and seek is the bad card, because their version of hide and seek means you go hide and then the rest of us try to kill you before dawn.
Yeah, and also the family gets money from the devil because capitalism is literally the devil.
Well, that was the one. That's the one surprise in the film.
That is not a surprise.
Well, it's not in the trailer. They tell you. I mean, they tell you a good 15 minutes in.
No, the surprises are more, I think, what we'd say emotional and.
Okay, sure.
And that's, I mean, it's a slasher film, but like a comedy.
Okay.
Yeah. Watch it ready or not.
It's worth a watch.
Also, Adam Brody's in it, but he's not like usual Adam Brody of like OC, like happy go lucky, and it turns out he can act in like a different role.
Wow.
I love Adam Brody. He was on Gilmore Girls. He was very sweet. That's what I thought like he did. Also, apparently he was in Scream 4. Apparently I haven't been paying attention. Anyway.
Now you can resolve nothing.
Yeah, so we'll resolve nothing. What's up with that?
Oh my god!
Actually, I think we resolved quite a bit today.
Go for it. What did we resolve?
Oh man, we're doing a PBS special.
Here's what I learned today. Have Hannah. I think we seem to agree that in the map of the mind, humor and horror actually occupy a lot of the same territory.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So I think that's a valuable thing to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can all resolve that. God knows we need a laugh during this time.
During horrific times, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's one other thing that I feel like I have to say about this particular show.
What's that?
Because I'm a veteran of the show. And I just want to say that we got through this entire podcast without once mentioning Riverdale.
Now you ruined it.
That's because Riverdale isn't funny. Riverdale is serious, dramatic horror. We'll talk about it next week.
No, it is extremely funny unintentionally sometimes. Like
it's
all
often
CW
intentionally
shows.
funny.
Like all CW shows, which actually, like, iZombie, Vampire Diaries, we could have talked about that stuff.
And
Buffy? We didn't talk about Buffy?
The Nancy Drew show. The new Nancy Drew show is great, actually.
Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods, also. Yeah.
So
I mean, we might have to do a show one day. We'll do not necessarily on horror, but like on just on the idea of meta commentary in film, right? Because there's some Cabin in the Woods, the Scream series. There are, and those are two horror ones, but in action movies, Last Action Hero, there are a lot of movies where the entire purpose of the film is to vocally comment on the genre that it is.
And I would say Bride of Frankenstein beat all those movies to the punch.
Quite possibly.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Bride of Frankenstein is a movie about making a Frankenstein movie.
Yeah.
So we've resolved that everyone should watch Bride of Frankenstein.
We resolved everyone should watch Ready or Not, I think, and Parasite.
And everyone should not watch Orgy of the Damned.
No.
we resolved everyone should give a 5-star review to Vox Popcast.
Everyone should give a 5-star review on Popcast and write give a 5-star rating and write the review. The review is very important. That helps other people find the show. But before we go into plugging our own show, Danny, where can people find you?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sectarian Review Podcast is on all your podcatchers, and there's a website. If you just Google it, you'll find it. I'm on Twitter at Danny P. Anderson. I love to talk to folks. So reach out. I'll reach back and not in a scary way, I suppose.
That sounded in context.
In the context. And my favorite movie, regardless of genre, is An American Werewolf in London, which is a great horror comedy.
Oh,
Oh,
Definitely.
That's a whole other episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe we didn't talk about that. That's amazing.
Maybe we should do horror comedy part 2.
Yeah, we might have to do that. John.
Yes. You can, if you so choose, follow me on Twitter at John D. Hadlock. But I just retweet Marxists and poetry.org or whatever. So I'm not a great follow. But if you like those things,
which I
I'll
do,
put it on your timeline. That's all I got.
Michael.
You can follow me on Twitter at Notorious PhD, but don't, because I never tweet. I just have that handle, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, you have like one of the coolest Twitter handles, and you don't use it at all.
Don't use it. Maybe I should try to use it. But I'm also the director of a new thing called the Center for Monster Studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And as soon as we have a website, I will come back on the show and tell you what the website is.
Mm-hmm. And you should also plug the book.
The Monster in Theater History, This Thing of Darkness, from Rutledge, 2018. You can get it on Amazon right now. And I love to come on here and plug my books. That's the best.
And linked in the show notes, as always.
Thank you.
Palindrome Hannah.
I guess you can find me on this podcast and on Twitter at Hanley Rogers. And you might actually get me to tweet because the election's coming up and I'm still very annoyed about Mississippi's absentee voting system, even though I don't vote there anymore. I'm very angry about it because it's impossible to understand their statutes, even if you have a law degree. Anyway, whatever. It's fine. It's not fine. Voter suppression's the true horror of our times.
I thought you were going to say Cindy was,
I mean, there are many outcomes of voter suppression, Mav. Some of them truly horrific.
And Wayne.
Stop following me.
That was dark again in the context of this show, particularly. Stop following me. They're outside. They're in the house.
Call is coming from inside the podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, mostly here these days. I have the Instagram and I have a blog, and the Instagram I update every day with photos.
Usually just one a day. You're a big one photo a day kind of guy. Every once in a while there's more, but
yeah, no, I've done one a day since like late March or early April. So
they're quite beautiful photographs, really.
Yes,
thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, all of the places, always at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show at Vox Popcast, again on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com, where you get to learn about what we're going to talk about next week, which, spoiler alert, is horror again, actually. And you can leave us comments and things that we might address on the show. You can suggest topics for future shows. You can comment on this show by going to the blog and reading the show notes and telling us what your thoughts are, what you liked, what you didn't like, how the hell did we forget whatever movie we forgot that we obviously should have talked about. You can tell us all kinds of things like that. And if you enjoy the show, and we certainly hope you do, then subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And like Wayne said earlier, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and that will stop monsters from getting you. It will. That's the only way to survive. The only way to survive the monster and to survive the horrors, you have to give the Vox Podcast a 5-star review and probably also not have sex, because that usually leads to demise. But I don't want to hear about that.
That was only in the 70s, okay?
Okay.
Some bizarre version of The Ring.
Yes. But anyway, yes, leave us a 5-star review. That helps other people find the show, makes us more popular, and moves up. Go ahead.
If you leave a 5-star review, are you then not allowed to have sex? Because that's kind of a disincentive.
No, once you leave a 5-star review, go out and have all the sex you want. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
Why am I on this podcast?
I don't know. Anyway, and I've lost my spot, so I'm just going to say I want to thank Maximilian of Thought Porn Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank you at home for listening. Thank all of our guests for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
What do you think will be the next obstacle the Earth people will put in our way?
Well, as long as they can think, we'll have our problems.